a real long-term investor hat on, and I'm very patient and I'm willing to wait. You know, in the short term, we've got to get past this scaling issue. We've got to figure out what's going to happen there. We got the halving coming up, and that will just be really interesting to see what happens from that. But in the long term, you know, I think it's going to be very hard to disrupt the network effect that Bitcoin has in terms of computer power behind it. And you know, disrupting it would kind of be like creating a new Facebook. Yes, someone could create a new Facebook, but getting 1 billion users is going to be very challenging. I think that Bitcoin, for all its faults, that people who are really into this community can give it. It works. I really, you know, we're kind of at the mercy of the developers at the moment because I'm not a real dev.
User disconnected from your channel.
You know, I try to understand it as much as I can, and it's my job to understand as much as I can. But you know, sometimes it gets a bit too geeky when trying to understand how to solve some of the scaling issues. But I've got faith in the community to solve it, and I don't think we will see. We will see other people attempt stuff. There'll be JP Morgan coin or whatever they call it on the blockchain, and central banks and people Bank of China and all this stuff will come through. But to me, there's only probably going to be one or two currencies that work at scale, that anyone can use, that's neutral, and you know, it fulfills some of the things that we're really excited about with Bitcoin. And it is incredibly disruptive. And no matter what people talk about the blockchain, it's easy to forget your enthusiasm. But I'd like to continually remind people that this is something really, really special. It's probably one of the most exciting times in financial history to be alive. The traditional financial sector has got some serious problems. It's you know, when you deposit your money at a bank, the bank becomes the legal owner of your money. With Bitcoin, you own your own Bitcoins. When you deposit your money with a bank and they become the legal owner, they spend your money as they wish. And they've done a really good job of putting together a Ponzi scheme in property markets and debt capital markets where, you know, quantitative easing is propping up a financial system based upon leveraging the central bank's balance sheet, and lots of, you know, real unsustainable practices, and where everyone's over dependent upon property, which is due a massive correction. So the financial, and then the final thing is banks are obviously creating money, whereas with Bitcoin it created this really clever fixed money supply mining system where you can forecast the monetary policy well into the future. And so while we're going to have lots and lots of coins, lots and lots of disruption, lots and lots of innovation, I'm really hopeful and bullish that Bitcoin becomes what I think it can become, and I'm patient to watch it.
Well, Simon, I know it's late for you, so I don't want to keep you too long. But what you said there, yeah, I mean, property, God, it's ridiculous, isn't it? But everything is being kept up and sustained by this never-ending, you know, flow of dollar printing. You know, like the US dollar. I mean, this is ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, but there is one thing that's really interesting, and this is it's actually gone unnoticed by a lot of the Bitcoin community, and that is that while central banks are talking about all this blockchain and launching their own cryptocurrencies, and people Bank of China have said that they're actually doing that. If I go back to the book that I wrote in 2006, Bank to the Future, I talked about the 3 problems that need to be solved. Is that people need to own their own money, people need to allocate their own money, and banks cannot be the creators of money, and money cannot be backed by debt. The interesting thing is that when people talk about, okay, so if the central bank creates their own digital currency, it will be a worse version of Bitcoin, which I completely agree with, but they're dismissing, actually, it's one of the most significant reforms in banking that we've ever seen, because what that would mean is that the central bank is issuing their own currency and is not backed by debt. The current system is that when a bank makes a loan, that creates brand new credit in the economy, and that acts as money, which is 97% of the money supply. And that model is being disrupted by if a central bank issues their own cryptocurrency, which means that they no longer are depending upon the private banking sector to create money. Now, whether you believe the private banking sector through fractional reserve banking is a better way of creating money than the central bank issuing it direct, not by debt, is another debate. But what Bitcoin and cryptocurrency has done is it created a third alternative, which is users issuing currency through mining, and the participants of the network benefiting from the profits of money creation. With the central bank now issuing their own digital currencies, that's bypassing the banks, and that is a significant problem for banks. That is a really, really big shift in the way that money is actually created. So although, yes, it's a worse version of Bitcoin, it's also very disruptive to the private banking model. So the Bitcoin community dismiss it because they think, well, why create a worse version of Bitcoin? But it's actually very interesting to see because it's actually bypassing the private banking sector and issuing money as people think money is issued by a central bank.
Yeah, and the other thing is people say, oh, a lot of like, what is Bitcoin's killer app? And I've been tweeting for a while now that to me, Bitcoin's killer app is already there, and that is financial sovereignty. You know, the ability to own your own money and not have it be seizable by the state, or, you know, like if the state comes along and says, oh, just shut, you know, this guy's account down, boom, just lock him out his funds, you know, or let's just do what Greece did and let's just dip our jar into the honeypot and just help ourselves to, you know, 5% of people's capital who are over X, you know, that's a risk. And as the system, you know, becomes bogged down more and more with, like you say, the unsustainable practices, you know, maybe that will play into Bitcoin's favor. At least I hope so.
Yeah, and that's a bet I'm putting a lot of my wealth on, and you know, the type of thing that we try to create at Bank to the Future is allowing investors to put a portion of their wealth into such an asset class. Should that type of event happen, that I believe we're moving towards. So.
Okay, and Bank to the Future has a mining fund as well. Is there plans to do more mining in that, or is that something that the existing one is just sitting as it is? And
so it's good to understand the typical types of clients that use us. So we tend to work on new adoption. So we've got lots of professional investors, about 18,500 high net worth investors, that some of them are hardcore Bitcoiners that have invested in some of the companies on our platform. We also have other funds and products that we put together for people that want to invest in this sector that may be new to the sector. So they're professional investors, but they're new to the Bitcoin space. So we've had a couple of mining funds that we launched on the platform. One of them was for Ether, and we did some Bitcoin mining funds. But it's more of a way of helping people, new investors and professional investors, get their first Bitcoins and experience what it's like to receive real-time dividends, and we do it all that way. So they accumulate their Bitcoins, they do some mining, and it gets them into the Bitcoin sector. And once they got their Bitcoins, they can invest them through the platform, or they can invest with traditional fiat as well.
Okay, sounds pretty interesting. Sorry, go ahead, Flipper.
I was going to say, I've never heard of you guys before, Bank to the Future. Like, this is the first time I've ever heard of you. How are people finding out about you?
Well, we don't tend to market to the Bitcoin community because we just deal with professional investors only. So, but you may have heard of some of the companies that have funded through our platform. So, some of them are Shapeshift. We did a part of the BitPay funding round. We did BitPayzer. We did Factum. We did Storage. But we're we're our own platform of professional investors, and we've done a lot of the major funding rounds within the sector. So
that sounds good. So basically, what you're saying is you're secretly the mastermind investors behind all the cool shit.
yeah, I like that. I reckon we should use that in our marketing.
Yeah, I think you should too, because otherwise, I looked at your website and I was like, what the hell is this? But
yeah, the other thing is we're registered with a regulator, so we're not like NXT where we're doing like crypto equity or something like that. We have to adhere to all global financial securities laws, and we have to filter investors and stuff like that. So it is very much a centralized company in that space. But we're bringing a lot of new money into the sector. To put it in context, when we launched about 11 months ago, we went from 0 invested through the platform to we're approaching 60 million now. And so if you look at the stats that are commonly quoted about venture capital investments from institutional money, they say $1 billion has been invested in the Bitcoin blockchain sector since over the last 7 years. Well, we've done about 6% of that volume in 11 months. It's all high net worth and professional investors, but not institutional investors.
Was moved out of your channel.
That's a pretty significant chunk of the investment that's gone in so far has gone through your platform. It's impressive. And can you tell us then about stuff you have coming down the line? What have you got lined up, or what new projects or things, investments have you got at the moment?
So I could talk about the live ones at the moment, but we tend not to say anything until they're launched on our platform, and it can only be announced to the members of our platform that have been through like the process of ensuring that they're qualified investors for who we're allowed to offer these opportunities to. But the live companies at the moment, we've got Bitso, which is the largest Bitcoin exchange in Mexico, and that's co-investing with Barry Silbert. And they've got what they're doing quite interesting is they've got a direct integration with the Mexican banking system. So rather than having to go through a bank, they can actually create the equivalent of Bitcoin bank accounts and clear funds in seconds, which has all sorts of interesting applications in terms of remittances, because they can do a direct clearing trade. They're quite interested. We just got a new record actually in terms of the fastest funded. We had Adam B. Levine of Let's Talk Bitcoin, his new company Tokenly just launched, and that got fully subscribed within the first day, and they're raising a little bit more, so it's still open to the investors. What else have we got right now? BSave is an interesting Bitcoin savings account where they're essentially putting together a easy interface and user experience for people that want Bitcoin and would like to receive interest. And some of your listeners are probably able to go into Bitfinex and do some margin loans in order to lend out their money, but they're doing that and then they're paying out real-time interest. They're trying to integrate some kind of transparency index so you can see that the funds are being used and flown in the right direction. They're a more earlier stage company, but they're on the platform live at the moment. And then we've also got a fund that's doing ether mining. Those are all the live ones right now.
But the ether miners are loving it right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, ether mining was an interesting one because we launched ether mining when ether first started going into the mining phase, and it was one of the most unpopular pitches on the platform. It didn't get traction at all. I think we only had about 27 grand invested. So we continue to do a lot of mining ourselves with our own funds. It turned out to be the most profitable investment we made. And so then we relaunched it, and when the price spiked up to about 13, it pulled in about 300,000 of investment, and now the price has corrected down to about 8 or so. but it's still, Ether mining is still a decent ROI. And what we've done to combat it is because the Ether mining algorithm will change. We did it where they can convert to mining the most profitable X11 as soon as the Ether mining period is over. So it's quite an interesting product.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. What are you doing with it right now? Are you holding that Ether? Are you just dumping for BTC, or are you selling to USD?
We're holding Ether at the moment because we're pretty well. We're very long on Bitcoin. Been long for a while. We're more investors and not much of a trader myself. I used to work as a market maker on the for an investment bank on the London Stock Exchange, which I left in about 2006 before getting into alternative finance. And yeah, don't do much trading myself. So I'm more of a long-term investor and leave it to people like you to make money out of the shorts and the pumps and everything. But we're holding Ether. And it's more of a hedge really, because the second largest blockchain, and we're kind of interested to see that there's decent volume in another blockchain other than Bitcoin. But I'm still really bullish on Bitcoin over Ether at the moment.
Yeah, that's good to hear. What's the what are people thinking out there right now about Bitcoin? Because I was talking the other day about Bitcoin's real world use. I mean, I love Bitcoin, hardcore Bitcoin fan and everything, but still it's like I'm not seeing it being used for international remittance. I'm not seeing like people sending money back to Mexico and Cuba with it. It's still kind of like use case is still pretty low. So what are your thoughts on that? And, people in the professional investment space, what are their concerns about that too?
I'd say, yeah, right now, Bitcoin it is. I mean, once you start earning money in Bitcoin, you realize how amazing it is. And when you earn money in, and you're earning money in, then you find out all the things you can do with it. And even if that's just sticking it on a Bitcoin debit card and using fiat currency. But my personal opinion is that, I mean, we funded Coin, which is the largest exchange in India. We've done BitPesa, the largest exchange in Africa. Now doing Bitso, which has almost reached their goal. And we're looking at applications like some of the companies we're speaking to at the moment are allowing people to invest in traditional mutual funds and build diversified portfolios using Bitcoins and ETFs and stuff like that. Where I think this becomes very useful is about 3 years from now, when all of this gets plugged together. So, one of the reasons why we were investing in companies that allow people to contribute to traditional investment products using Bitcoin is that then means that someone can set up the equivalent of a pension from India without paying the 7% fees that they would normally pay to invest in a mutual fund if they were based in America. And when you plug all these things together, you're completely right. None of the user cases that we think could be done with Bitcoin are being done well at the moment. But exactly. It's about another 3 years of plugging this all together when I think you're going to see things useful. I mean, Uphold was an interesting company as well when they create products that take volatility out. And now you've got another couple of years of what applications can be built. So you had Bitwage was another company we invested in. They're doing payroll when you have lots of staff in like the Philippines or Brazil and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you, but we're taking a real long-term view here, and all of the investors that invest through us, they know that this is a 5 to 10 year game of gradually, one step at a time, chunking away at every financial product and disrupting a multi-trillion-dollar market in banking and finance.
Okay, I'm getting more and more questions as you talk. I was going to say, are you based in the UK? Are you incorporated somewhere else? Are you banked somewhere else? I mean, what is the legal status and what is the like minimum investment? How is it decided where you want to invest? Do you select from like a group of products? Are you tied to like a certain amount of time in that investment? Can you move it and put it in another particular product? How does that all work?
Okay, do you want to do that one at a time, and I'll go through them all?
Yeah, so where are you based, incorporated, and banked?
Based on the internet, but we got a multi-jurisdictional structure. So we have companies in Cayman Islands, we have companies in Hong Kong, and what we do is we're registered with the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, and we have a multi-jurisdictional structure whereby different areas of the business perform different tasks, and it was kind of like a 3-year process of putting together the multi-jurisdictional and invested significant sums in doing so. So we're not really based anywhere, but you're having contract with a Cayman Island company, and then we have different companies that perform different tasks in different areas of the world.
That sounds really interesting as a setup. I mean, it must require some expertise to, set that up.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a really good team. We got some great legal minds. My background was I was a market maker for a couple of years for an investment bank called KBC on the London Stock Exchange, and then I worked in corporate finance doing IPOs for mid-cap companies. So
this is right up your street then, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, and then I left in 2006, wrote a book called Bank to the Future, which was kind of the first draft was pre-Bitcoin, fintech, really. And I did a couple of other drafts as Bitcoin came out. But the reason I got into Bitcoin in the first place was because I was actually a big critic of banking, left in 2006 and wrote a book on what needs to happen to Bitcoin. What needs to happen in banking to make it sustainable. And then Bitcoin came along and actually created the first decentralized experiment that actually solves a lot of the things I was criticizing banking for. That's why I first got into it. And I was invited to the first Bitcoin conference by Amir Taki in Prague, and just been involved since, really.
Brilliant, I love it. So going back to Bank to the Future then, just to get the rundown on what you guys are. So is there a minimum investment time and amount, and how do you choose what you're going to invest in? Is it decided by you or the investor?
So the minimum investment is normally either €1,000, pounds, or dollars, depending on which currency the company is raising finance in. And you can invest with Bitcoin, we pass the Bitcoins on to the company. They're not exchanged through BitPay or anything like that. €1,000, dollars, or pounds is normally the minimum. Sometimes it's higher depending on the deal. So when we did the Bitcoin Group IPO, the minimum investment had to be 2,000 Australian dollars just because of regulatory reasons. So those are normally the minimum. We don't take micro investments or smaller than that. It's all self-managed, so we have different products. So we launched a fund on the platform where, for those that don't want to do the work themselves, then we created Bitcoin Capital. But for those that want to save some money and manage their own portfolio, then they just pick their own deals. We created the fund really for those that are not comfortable picking their own deals. So it's an expensive way in, the fund, or you can take the self-managed process where you pick your own portfolio. In terms of fees and stuff for investors, we don't charge on the way in, but you do need to pay. For example, if you pay by card, you'd have to pay the card payment processing fee. If you pay by Bitcoins, it's free to invest. But the charge that we charge is 5% of any dividends paid and 5% of an exit. So what you're investing on is typically venture capital that's going to be you're investing in a diversified pool of companies. If you make 10 investments, the expectation is that a couple of those will go on to be big if the sector prevails. And some of those will just not do anything, and a few will go bust along the way. But you'd expect to get the earliest returns in about 3 years, normally 5 to 7. So it's real high risk, high return, long-term investing.
So are these investments typically like a Series A investment, or is it you form part of a pool to go to part of a Series A investment, or is it later stage investments?
Yeah, Series A is our sweet spot. Sometimes we do like pre-Series A seed rounds, but typically, it's the deals that you would have read about on CoinDesk or something like that a venture capitalists invest. We make sure we get an allocation, and we allow high net worth and individual investors to get in on the round on the exact same terms, and then we put together an SPV and pull that together. So you got pooled voting rights. And we got a really good structure, so the company doesn't end up with hundreds of investors, which prevents them raising further funding in the future.
As an example,
so you can get visibility of like the term sheets as well, and sort of thing.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits. Is we've got a very streamlined process where we'll go through all the term sheets, and then you have a standardized investment agreement, and then you can log into your portfolio, download all the standardized investment agreements, share certificates. And it's all done online, so you can see all that and all the due diligence documents you need.
So when you invested in Factum, what were you investing in? Just basically giving them money to put time and effort into developing their product, or was it kind of actually buying, the Factum coin, if you like?
So with Factum, they've a not-for-profit and a for-profit side. The coin was issued by, I forget the terms right now, but probably the Factum Foundation or something like that. And then they also had a blockchain consulting firm, which was the for-profit side of the business, and we were investing in the equity of that.
Disconnected from your channel.
And it's kind of like the Mozilla Foundation versus Mozilla, which is the for-profit side. And it is really quite interesting because they put together a new model, and Storage followed the same concept, which is raising some early stage funding through selling tokens, which funds some of the development of the token, and then putting together a for-profit equity deal on the side, which attracts some venture capital investors, which is the for-profit side of using the technology that they're building in order to build applications for their clients that are looking to use the Bitcoin blockchain and puts data on there in large quantities.
Yeah, I see that. 12,000 Bitcoin invested, $40 million.
Yeah, so we've had approximately 12,500 coin invested in the platform in the 11 months that we've been live.
93% raised money. Shit, I got ideas.
Yeah, the stat that it doesn't say is that 1% of our applications get through. So we're by no means, and that's where the relationship with StartJoin comes through, because what we tend to do is, if it's early stage, then we can send that over to a crowdfunding. We can guide them on that type. We send them over to do something to grow further forward. So it's not really idea funding. The company would have to have reached a certain stage before they can get on BnkToTheFuture. I think, sorry, I said 1%. I think the exact stats is we've had 780 applications and 78 pitches have gone live, so it's more like 10%.
Do you have a Bitfinex lending kind of branch?
We don't at the moment, but it is quite interesting to me because lending for margin trading is probably the safest and the most effective model for getting some kind of interest or return on your Bitcoin. So I think it's a really interesting model. We don't do anything with that right now, but we invested in BSave, who've put together the interface to do that. But I do that on some of my own personal funds, but we haven't done that on company Bitcoins or anything, and we don't offer it as a service yet.
Yeah, so BSave, this is somebody you've invested in, is it?
Yeah, so BSave is someone that I personally invested in. We invested through our fund, and we also allocated a portion of it to investors on our platform, and they're currently live right now. I think they passed their minimum funding goal yesterday, so they're just raising extra right now. So sometimes if the funding round is going particularly well, then they'll raise further funding and continue on through. So the market sets a lot of the demand for that as well. We make the distinction between the for-profit companies and the not-for-profit, and so new models are really coming. The whole ICO token sale really seems to be doing well in funding new innovation in this space when it's a not-for-profit or open source model. And then if it evolves into a company later and they need to sell equity, then we've got a very large community of professional investors looking to invest in this stuff as long as you've got intentions of exiting the company in the future and making investors money.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see. So if you look at the stats on our homepage, we publish a number of Bitcoins that we've done versus the number of fiat. And so if you look at a typical
user left your channel,
let's use the typical example of Overstock. They say they report that less than 3% at the peak was how many people pay with Bitcoin versus how many people pay with fiat. My guess is it's less than that. But investing is a real interesting user case of Bitcoin, and obviously because we're a bit of a niche and we're dealing with fintech companies, it's becoming a decent chunk of the investment. Still, the vast majority is still with people wanting to invest in fiat because we tend to target new investors that have built a large portfolio in other areas, but they're new to this sector. But it's interesting to see that Bitcoin is becoming a decent user case, and sometimes it's completely skewed. So Tokenly, which was Adam B. Levine's new company, which he's been working on for several years, we've seen that about 80% of that has come in through Bitcoin, and only about 10-20% of that came in through fiat. So it's really interesting to see.
Yeah. It's like it's easy for people to invest in Bitcoin, isn't it? It's like I just have to pull out my phone and bam, I've just done it.
Yes, it's really easy. And what we're finding is because when we do pay, for example, we created a fund that pays dividends in Bitcoin. So what we're finding is that when we pay investors in Bitcoin, that's their first time they receive Bitcoin because they were allowed to pay with fiat and invest with fiat. And then once they got their Bitcoin, so then asking some of the more experienced investors on the pitch forum, hey, how do I store these securely now? And they're recommending what type of wallets. And then once they got their wallets, and then thinking, okay, what types of things can I do with that? So we're really trying to focus on taking these investors that have got a lot of capital that can afford to invest in something as speculative as this, and driving some new adoption there. And I think there's going to be a very large amount. We're kind of waiting for more and more financial crisis, but I think in 2016, as the markets get worse and worse, I think now the timing and everything's perfect to drive a real chunk of investment from speculators that want to hedge against the traditional investment products. And I think we're going to see more and more of that, and that's a trend that's going to be on the move.